Hello, welcome to Ask the Expert, an award-winning daily series from 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. to help small businesses. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments of the live feed. If you need any more advice, join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. During the live session, we'll be running a poll, so please do engage with it and I'll reveal the results at the end. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Nana Parry. I am the founder of a company called Tectonic. And what Tectonic does is hyper-targeted customer research. So what that means is we find decision makers so that companies can do qualitative research and understand the needs of their customers. Today, I'm going to be speaking to you actually not about customer research, which I have done in the past, but most of the content today is going to be around winning early stage investment. And the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because as small business owners, we often automatically go to the view that we need investment, which may be true. But actually, what I want to focus on today are some of the areas that are not often talked about when it comes to raising investment. Often we hear about the pitch deck, we hear about the valuations and the millions raised. It seems like everyone is doing this, but actually through my experience of raising early stage investment, having failed at it and been successful at it for two businesses, I wanted to share some of the things that I learned that hopefully will help you if you are deciding to raise investment. And just wanted to be clear that I'm sharing my personal experiences. Obviously, there are people that have raised money that don't share the same experiences as myself, but I wanted to share those because they're true to me. And in the past, when I've shared them, they've been valuable to others. So I wanted to share it with this group. Okay, so if you are thinking about raising investment, one thing that really I learned early on was that it's actually more of an art than a science. And what do I mean by that? Well, we often get told, read this book about how to value your company, or this is exactly how you need to pitch. You need 10 slides, it has to have introduction, target market, etc. But what I found is that it's actually the softer skills that actually get you the investment. And one example of that is the fact that the person who is investing, even though it may be a company, there's still people that are making the decisions. So ultimately, it's about building relationships with those people who make the decisions about where they deploy their capital. And it could be a venture fund, an early stage venture fund, where it's their whole business to invest in these businesses. Or it could be an individual. It could be an angel investor who has made some money, has a little bit of money stashed away, and would like to invest it in something which is a little riskier, which a lot of businesses are. Also, when it comes to the art, not science piece, it's also related to how much you actually spend time with them, actually building that relationship. So there's one thing to actually, try and understand them as people, but another thing is there's just the nature of having to have multiple interactions with someone before they actually get to know you as a person. So if I asked any of you today, could you give me, £200,000 if you had it? The likelihood is I'll get no's because A, you don't know me very well, and B, you're not sure of my credibility. So those are some of the things that are important to overcome when raising early stage investment. Another thing is that I think what worked for me was I treated my potential investors as prospective customers. So as I mentioned before, I'm in the customer insights world. I'm used to trying to find ways to get potential customers to connect with our clients without much background. So I'm pretty good at that. But the way I treated this whole process was, okay, I know I need investment. I know that I'm more likely to get no's than yeses. Therefore, I know that I need to build a pipeline of customers or a pipeline of investors. So I really went in with that view. So I looked at my network. At the time, I had no network. So I looked at the network that I did have and saw who could be people that could introduce me to other people. I then wrote down their names in a spreadsheet. You have more advanced customer relationship management tools now. But at the time, I had a Google Sheet, wrote down their names, wrote down their email addresses, their phone numbers. And I also had what I called a RAG status, which was effectively a red, amber, green status. And what that status showed me was my level of relationship with those individuals. So, for example, if it was someone that I did not know, but I was being introduced to them, I would normally put an amber status because that meant that it's a bit of a warm lead. They do have, there is some connection. But how do I turn that to green? How do I actually turn that relationship to something where if they, if I called them, they'd actually pick up the phone? So that's one thing. Try and treat it as a sales process. Um, the third thing is I had an assumption that the best ideas got funded. I remember when I was, pitching in large groups to large groups of people, and I thought, okay, it's a kind of a competition. The best ideas will get funded. But what I realized later on was that it had nothing to do with the best ideas. It had to do with the best salespeople. That was the truth that I uncovered. And I don't mean sales in the respect of, old school car salesman type. What I mean is, how can the people that did get investment, the way they did that was because they actually connected and understood the people that were deploying the capital. So it's very, very much about how you actually remove that assumption that it's about your idea. Most of the time, the idea is obviously important and what you do with it, but most of the time it's about how you communicate that concept and how it resonates with the other person, which is a huge part of sales. The next thing is how do you create a fear of missing out without, how do you create a fear of missing out, basically? So, whenever I got some interest from an investor, what I would do is I would talk to other investors and say, yeah, I've got some people who are interested already. I really, really like them, but, I just want to see where you're at so I can make the best decision. What that does is it starts to validate and provide more trust in what you're doing. So, where possible, I would say to one investor and the other investor, look, I want to do a deal here. I'm not sure who to go for. How can you help me make a decision? I also often just used to ask for advice. So, in my early conversations with investors, I very rarely asked them for money on the first meeting. I don't think I ever did, even if it was a formal pitch. What I would do is communicate my vision, or I would be asking them for advice and just say, look, this is where I'm at right now. Actually, what I want to do is figure out what I need to do next. Because asking for advice actually helps build relationships too and strengthens that bond that makes it more likely for you to get that investment over other companies. Another point, so understanding the reasons why your individual prospective investor invests and tap into that. So, what do I mean by that? Again, it's coming down more to the sales part, but there are many different reasons as to why people invest. It could be because they are literally looking to invest in a type of business that's going to be the next Facebook. It could be that they're extremely passionate about the space that you're in. It also could be the fact that they're just bored and rich and want to do something exciting. And those reasons do exist as well. And I think the key thing here is if you can understand the motivations as to why they're investing, the more likely you are to get the investment because your storytelling can actually tap into the areas that they care about the most. Another one, your pitch deck isn't as important as you think. So I mentioned it a little bit earlier on, how we kind of feel that there's a lot of content around there, around the pitch deck itself, how you create the perfect pitch deck. But the pitch deck is not what gets you the investment, especially from an early stage investor point of view. It's actually a way to better communicate your story, but you can have an amazing pitch deck, but actually not have a relationship with the investor. And often I have received chunks of cash from angel investors without actually showing them the pitch deck by just communicating my story. So don't get obsessed or bogged down with the pitch deck. It's obviously important, but it's not the be all and end all. Another key point, investors are just people. I think sometimes when I was getting early stage investment, coming from a network, I didn't know many wealthy people. I always felt that, they were better than me in a way, or that, I'm begging for their money or something. And once I realized that they're just individuals who, we're trying to create a mutual exchange of value. Once I started to elevate that conversation in that way, it actually gave me a lot more credibility. So I was able to negotiate better when it came to valuation or equity, but also it gave the investor the opportunity to respect the work that I'm doing a bit more, because I went into those conversations as equals, not as someone who was underneath them that needed money. Um, Another one. So if you're doing it right, you're getting more no's than yeses. This is going to be my final point before moving into the questions. One thing, just to set expectations. Sometimes when you're early stage, you feel like, all right, I've had two conversations. They both said no. I've got lots more work to do, etc. But really, a lot of the time, getting those no's actually provides learning opportunity. It provides an opportunity for you to see, okay, where do I need to change? Where might I need to change my style, my content, how I actually communicate? And actually, if you're doing it right, you probably are getting more no's than yeses. And it's not about getting everyone to say yes. It's about getting the right number of people to say yes to achieve your financial objective. Awesome. So there was a lot there. So hopefully that was useful. I'm just now going to move into the questions. Okay. So we've got a question from Paloma from Twitter. I've recently got some investment to be able to scale, and me and my co-founder are looking to hire some people, but we're unsure what we need first. Any tips on recruiting the first people to a company? Yeah, it's a really good question. And one thing I would say is it's going to be very dependent on your needs. So if you have just raised investment, the likelihood is that you would have broken down the areas in which you're going to invest that money and how it aligns to your strategy, right? Because what you don't want to be doing is spending money in an area that's actually not going to help you to grow. So my recommendation is to look at the breakdown that you had in terms of what you're going to use the money for. Look at your strategy again. Is it about building a product? Is it about getting more sales right now? Is it about operational excellence? Whatever the strategy is, coordinate that with your hiring activity. So if it's about sales, is it about investing in lead generation, or is it about investing in a B2B salesperson? So I would say the first hire obviously depends very much on where your strategy lies, but try and link where the amount of money you have, where you need to invest to grow the valuation or to grow your income or your profit, and assign it there. So hopefully that answers your question. Got another question from Charlie on Facebook Messenger. Morning, Nana. I run a small creative agency and we want to grow. Should we look at increasing the services we offer that we can sell to existing customers, or focus on finding new clients? Yeah, thank you for that question, Charlie. So when it comes to growth in general, I believe the number is 3 times easier to sell to an existing customer than it is to acquire a new customer. And if you even take the easy part out of it, you actually it actually costs you more to get a new customer than to sell to an existing customer. Reason being, you've already invested time and money into getting to know the individual customer, so that they actually already trust you, especially if you do good work for them. So my view is actually focus mostly on your existing customers, but it's not either or. I think you have to do both, because ultimately by getting new customers, you're reducing the risk of if an existing customer leaves you. The important thing is actually turning that customer into a lifelong or a loyal customer over time, and being really close to them to understand their needs, so your solutions can actually adapt to what they're doing. Hopefully that answered your question. Got a question from Archie on Instagram. I'm thinking of looking for investment for my business, but I'm not clear on what sort of relationship we're supposed to have with investors. What could we be looking for? Yeah, interesting question. So in my view, as I kind of mentioned before, actually building the relationship with investors is very important. But the way that I do it is I focus on advice, kind of mentorship beforehand, especially if it's angel investing or early stage investing. Imagine you are the investor, and after meeting you once, you're like, okay, I've emailed you and said, hey, I'd love to get investment from you, etc. it actually puts a bit of a wall up because there's not a strong enough relationship there. My view from the investors that I've received money from, some of them I've known for a year before I even broached the concept of actually raising money or needing money. So it's a really good exercise to get to know investors before you need investment, because just by speaking to them and getting advice from them, because a lot of investors do like to give advice, you're actually building a relationship over time. So when you've had that seventh or eighth meeting, if it gets to that, you can actually say, look, I've implemented some of your advice. This is how it's going. You can also show traction in how the advice they've given you has actually been implemented. And then you can say, okay, this is where I'm going with investment. What do you think? And you can see their reaction. That's what's worked for me. So hopefully that answers your question. Danielle on Facebook Messenger. I've had a couple of meetings with investors, and one or two are interested, but have suggested changes that I'm not sure I'm comfortable with. Should I compromise or try to negotiate? And how should I navigate these conversations? Yeah, first of all, well done for getting interest from an investment point of view. It's definitely not easy. So my view is, first of all, you are the founder or you are the leader of the business. My view is, in terms of your vision, you shouldn't compromise your vision for anyone, actually. If investors would like you to go in another direction and you agree with that direction because they've given you a different level of insight that you hadn't previously experienced, then take it into account and decide if you want to change your business in a specific way. However, I personally wouldn't attract or take investment on the condition that I change something that I either passionately believe from a emotional point of view, or I believe from a revenue or growth point of view is going to take me in that direction. That's my personality. I'd rather regret things that I did do than I didn't do. So that's my view on that. In terms of navigating these conversations, I think there's a couple of ways you could approach it. Number one, you could actually see if you can have a conversation with them about the reasons as to why you want to move in this direction, because maybe they don't have certain insight or foresight that you have. But secondly, it could be a case of, look, why don't we try my strategy first? Because I know I have good evidence that it works. And then, if it doesn't, we can have a conversation about how that might change. But the really important thing here is, if you lose the investment as a result of sticking to your principles or sticking to your vision, that's no bad thing. There will be investors, they're likely going to be investors that do agree with the way that you want to take it, or they trust you implicitly to actually deliver on what you said you're going to do regardless. Great, thank you. So we've got a question from Brian on Twitter. What do you think most businesses get wrong in their pitch deck, and what can we learn from it? Yeah, really good question. So first of all, I think too many slides is one. Even if you do have an existing relationship with the investor, assume that people have short attention spans, assume that you need to communicate your value early on and why you are the right person or the right team to do it. So I think that's one, just having too many slides. I think the second one is actually being very regimented with the slides. So by that, I mean, slide one is problem, slide two is solution, etc. Yes, some investors want to see it in that way, but I think a mistake is not to tell it in a story, because for thousands of years, we've known humanity best absorbs information in story form. That's how, they best retain information. So if you can do that, and also weave in the key information that you need to be able to show that you are an investable operation, then that would be another mistake that I think people make, just not telling it in the form of humanity as a story. I think the final thing in the pitch deck is showing really granular financials in your pitch deck. If you're doing a 10-15 minute pitch, there's going to be absolutely no time to interrogate, how much you're paying X person, over the next 3 years, right? So it's all about having the appropriate level of information in the pitch deck so you can actually communicate what you need to communicate to the investor. So hopefully that answers your question as well. And question from Anton. I'm a bit lost when it comes to value in my business. Are there any resources or databases I could be referencing in order to compare values of similar businesses in my sector? Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of things here. I'll give you the answer to your kind of straight question, which was about resources. So Seed Camp is a really good resource. They have lots of different blogs and articles about how to value from a founder perspective and how to value from an investor perspective. There's also a tool called PitchBook, which shows different valuations of different companies and how you could actually compare. There's also a website called Funds, Fundz, which are based in the US. But actually, the point I wanted to make here is that in an early stage investor point of view, when you don't have a lot of traction, you don't have a lot of data, actually it's mostly made up, right? It's mostly this is where you need the valuation to be and finding an investor to match it without, overvaluing the company. So I've definitely been laughed out of rooms where I've told people my business is worth 2 million. I've had no customers, no clear traction in that way. But I've risked that to really understand from a market perspective, where does my valuation land? If people, if I'm getting lots of people saying we don't invest at 2 million, then I need to maybe consider where I'm at in the actual value chain when it comes to the investor point of view. So yeah, it's definitely more art than science there. One way you could do the valuation is to say, okay, I know I need X amount of money and I'm willing to give away X percentage. Therefore, my valuation is Y. And then it's up to you to prove to investors as to why your valuation is that. Um, got a question from Hamza on Facebook. Hi, Nana. I'm a restaurant owner and survived the pandemic by marketing online and pivoting to deliveries. Can my business grow faster selling to current customers or new ones? I'm going to spend a short amount of time on that because I answered it previously with another question. But effectively, yes, focus on definitely your existing customers, providing you've given them a good and delightful service. That's going to be much easier than finding new customers. But please do both. It's not an either or. Great. A question from Addy on Twitter. Hi, Nana. Is crowdfunding a viable alternative to getting an investor? And what do you think goes into a crowdfunding campaign? Yeah, really good question. So I think it is a viable alternative, but it very much depends on the type of business that you are creating. So, for example, I did a crowdfunding campaign with some friends on a football card game called Next Goal Wins. And we created, the artwork, we developed the mechanics of the game, we did all the videos, the marketing, and stuck it into a crowdfunding campaign. However, we already had some people lined up on the day to put money into the crowdfunding campaign. Because if I go back to that point of fear of missing out, what you don't want to do is launch a crowdfunding campaign and then day one, day two, day three, there's not a lot of traction because people want the fear of missing out or getting something valuable. They want to get something valuable. So it is a viable alternative. I'd say mostly for kind of product businesses. Service businesses can do well there too, but it is more difficult. And when it goes into goes into a crowdfunding campaign, it's a lot of work. It's not a small amount of work. It's a lot of work and potentially money, up front to be able to actually deliver on it. But things like making sure you've got people set up to invest on day one and day two, and also on the last days as well. Having all the material set up, the more information you give, the more credible your solution is as well. And also working with the companies that actually run the crowdfunding campaigns and using their advice to best help you achieve your targets. Awesome. Got a question from Alexander. How to put together a pitch deck and where to find good previous examples and how long should it last? Okay, yeah. So if you, I don't know of a specific resource, maybe Seed Camp will likely have something around how to put together a good pitch deck. That's SEEDCMP, Seed Camp. So that's one resource that you could use. If you actually Google literally previous pitch decks that raised X amount of money, depending on what your achievement, what your target is, you'll also be able to find some things there too. And just I implore you to look at different examples and create your own version, because there's no point staying to a rigid structure that you don't agree with. But there's the Airbnb pitch deck, there's the Dropbox pitch deck, there's more recent ones like Hopin. You'll be able to find these things online and actually start to take a look for yourself. And then your last question, how long should it last? So I have two pitch decks most of the time. I have like a taster deck, which is literally 5 slides. It's, the team, the problem I'm solving, the solution, the traction that I've gained, and what amount of money I'm looking for. But then I also have a main pitch deck, which is anywhere between 10 and 15 slides. But what I will do is have a master pitch deck, which might have 30 or 40 slides, and depending on who I'm speaking to, I will switch out some of those slides into this 10 or 15 slide deck as well. But when you're actually pitching, you want to keep it as short as possible, but so you can communicate the right information. But I would say, 10 minutes is a good amount of time. Okay, question from Damien on Instagram. So, how do you deal with rejection? Does it mean you should restructure your product or service, or is it more that you need to work on how you're pitching it? So, yeah, I deal with rejection pretty well in the investment world because it's just part of the game. As soon as I knew, similarly from a sales perspective, most people that sell, even the best salespeople, if you're B2B, for example, will get, a 3-in-1, ratio, as in for every 3 people they try and sell to, one actually converts. And that's seen as quite good in the sales world. So that's something that I just understood, that that's the case, and there's not much I can do about that. So I don't see it as rejection. I see it as values or opportunity did not align with that particular individual, and I will find opportunity and value that does align with other groups or with other people. So that's how I deal with it in my head. I don't think you should necessarily restructure your product or service, but I think if you're approaching the pitches correctly, and you're actually trying to get advice as you're actually pitching as well, and do the Q&A. I write down every single question that I'm ever asked during Q&A. I think it's a point to then decide if you will actually use that information to restructure your product or service. And then, yeah, I think pitching it is just practice. That's all you can do. Um, Great. So thank you very much. Answered all the questions I can. Hope some of that was useful. And the poll results are in. And we asked you, does your business need investment? And 50% of you said yes, 50% of you said no, and 0 said, I don't know. And again, with investment, it's really a case of sometimes we might think we need investment because we see it as a way to actually achieve our goals. But obviously, there's a flip side. You're giving away parts of your business as well. And if you don't need investment, it might be a case of you've decided to run your business in a specific way to kind of grow slowly over time, which is no issue at all. Or you could do it through other means, other financial instruments, such as loans or grants as well. So there's no one right way. Obviously, it depends significantly on the type of business that you have, but it's really interesting just to see that it's kind of evenly split. Okay, so coming to the end now. Thank you all for tuning in. If you want to get in contact with me, you can send me a message on LinkedIn under the name Nana Parry. And coming up on Ask the Expert tomorrow is Cameron Shearer, co-founder and CEO of Superscript, an insurtech scale-up that delivers customer-centric insurance for small businesses. So tune in to learn how to scale a business. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed answering your questions this morning, and hope you all have an awesome day. Thank you.